Hey, Calvary family. Hey, great to be with you all. We
Yes.
are continuing our journey through the book of Revelation,
Week 3. And we have a lot to discuss today. So we're going to go right into it
and we're going to talk like real fast.
really quick.
So, we're going to be covering chapters 12 through, what is it,
17.
17 today,
Yes.
or thereabouts. So,
Don't hold us
immediately,
to it.
chapter 12, we jump in, we see a woman, a dragon, and a child. And the child is the one who is going to rule over all nations. That's Jesus. That's what we've been waiting for. And from this point on, we're going to see a real unveiling of Jesus. But up until this point, we've been moving in somewhat of a linear fashion. We've been going forward, we kind of loop back around and go forward again and do it like that. Now we hit the brakes almost
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah, up until this point, we've been getting the parade view. We've seen the parade going by from the ground, but now we're brought up to in a helicopter and we're looking down at the whole thing. That's what you might call the spiritual view on this.
Yeah, and so like what do we see when we're looking at all the histories all at once? Well, we see the promise.
Yeah, we see and picking up right from the end of go all the way back to Genesis. We're looking at the fall of man. What happens at the end of the fall of man? There's a prophecy, the first prophecy of the Messiah, and it's that the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent is angry with that.
And that's what we see right there. We see the serpent angry. But first we see the woman. First we see the woman. The question is, who is the woman? And lots of people have different views on that. But if you look at it biblically, if you look at it contextually, I think everybody would agree. Well, not
For the most
everybody,
part.
most part would agree it's Israel. Israel fits the bill. Who are the 12 stars then that are over her head? Well, that goes back to
Genesis
Genesis.
37. Yeah.
Yeah.
And which read yourself, read Genesis, that's 37. It's Joseph's dream. And so if you want more context around the stars and the sun and the moon, and so that builds up the woman in a pretty good detail for this context here.
That's right. Jacob gives us the interpretation of that dream. He knew it exactly what it meant. And so this brings us back to the point we mentioned last week. When you don't understand something in the book of Revelation, I mean, you could read it again. That's great. That's great. But if you really want to understand it, go back into some of the Old Testament books and read them again, and you'll start to see some of the details fill in.
Absolutely. Yeah, important to be going back as you read through this stuff. Don't just reread the book again. But we also have to talk about the dragon. We can talk about the woman, and that's great. But we also do have to talk about the dragon here. And listen, later in Revelation, it'll tell us straight up like that the dragon is the Satan.
That's right.
And it's the same
Right on.
serpent of old that we've been seeing this whole time. He fails. Like, of course, he fails to devour the child. The Messiah is saved. And so what does he do? He's angry. He gets thrown out of heaven, and now he's wreaking havoc on the earth. And he's going to war against the children, the followers of the Messiah. Now,
and we also see with the dragon that he takes a third of the stars
takes
with
a
him.
third of the stars with him. That is read is Ezekiel. That's pulling straight from the idea of the angels falling from heaven with him. He does not go quietly. When you do see the dragon here on earth, John wants to communicate something very strongly, both to his original audience then and to us now. His original audience, they were under the oppression of the Roman Empire. They had Nero's boot at their throats. And so what he was communicating, and what he's always been communicating, is that our battle is not with flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. It's against the dragon, the serpent, behind the nations. And so for his original audience, they were not to attack the Roman Empire. That was not their enemy.
Right, there is a way that they were to conquer, and it tells us in here. I mean, we've been seeing the conquering theme as we've been going through the book.
Absolutely.
It tells us there right in chapter 12, verse 11. And they overcame, or they conquered. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they didn't love their lives unto death. The blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony.
Remember that image. That is going to be reoccurring, and it has been up until this point.
And then we move into chapter 13. And here we have overlapping imagery again. And so we have the beast, but now it looks like a leopard, or is it a dragon? And yes, actually, indeed, the picture is directly associated with Satan. Right?
And really important to this section, go back right now and read Daniel chapter 7, because John is pulling straight from that. It's really essential for these two beasts that we're going to see, because in Daniel, there's actually 4 beasts. And what you get here in Revelation is John takes those 4 beasts and condenses them down to 2. This first one has characteristics of all 4 of those beasts. Now, those 4 original beasts, Daniel tells us what they are. They're world empires. And so here, seeing characteristics of all 4 of them, this tells us that this final beast is one last great empire.
That's
one
right.
last empire set against God. It has characteristics of all these world empires up until this point. One final hurrah, you might say.
And then there's one leader that kind of rises up out of that empire. That's the leader of it all. But we're going to refrain about talking about him right now.
We got to jump into the second beast and talk about him.
That's right. And so again, there's a lot of overlapping details here. But the first beast shares a lot of the same imagery as the dragon. And here we're seeing it once again. We begin to get a close-up view of this world leader, the ruler of this empire. He speaks like the dragon, like Satan himself. His characteristics of speech, if you look at verse 14, he deceives.
Deceptive.
Yeah, he deceives.
Deceptive.
Straight Satan's playbook. Okay, and on top of that, he has supernatural powers, and all the world is made to worship him, except those, of course, who are followers of Jesus. They're not going to worship him, and they're sealed already. We talked about that earlier. Now, for the other seal, the infamous 666.
Yep. We're going to try to keep this one brief because obviously this is a bed of speculation, and you will not find the meaning of this in news headlines. So we're going to talk about that really.
A lot of people try to.
They try to.
Okay. No other passage of scripture has caused more anxiety or more speculation than this. And so we're not going to be able to clear it up for you now, but let me tell you what it isn't. Okay. In my lifetime, I'm pretty old. I've seen this number be proclaimed as various things through the time. Okay. At first it was Social Security number. Somehow they figured it out where these 3 sections of a Social Security number would calculate out when it's being processed to 666. And so if you got a Social Security number, you got the mark until everybody got one. And then they figured out, okay, well, that can't be it. And so they move on. And then we had Reagan elected as president. And so he was now the Antichrist.
Yeah, Ronald Wilson Reagan. You've got 666.
6 letters in each one of those names, right? Okay, so anyway, now that one didn't work, and go forward a little bit further, and you have the RFID tags, which, we had those, and that's actually still one of the things that gets played around with a lot. But then we started chipping our animals with it, dogs and cats and all of that. And I get it, no cats in heaven, but dogs, anyway. People still like that one a lot. Yeah. Recently, we've had the COVID vaccine as the mark. If you get the vaccine, you've got the mark. Or just a couple of weeks ago, we had the emergency broadcast system that went off on your phones, everyone's phone. People were turning it off because they didn't want it to activate the vaccine in them, which would be the mark and so forth like that.
And and you can go back, and for every generation, they've got a couple of them. Now, but for the original generation, let's look at the audience that John was writing to, these churches. Under active persecution. Yeah. There was something he was writing about, and it's not too subtle. Like he tells them there, if you're smart, you're going to figure this out. It's not very subtle anti-imperialistic ideology. Like, look at the 2 beasts. You got the twin beasts, and for one of them, it's got this war characteristics to it because it's going to war against the Saints. So you've got this military industrial complex, and the second one, it's about trade. You've got it buying and selling goes through the second beast. So you've got the economic industrial machine going on there. Those are the twin pillars of any empire, and especially the Roman Empire was no exception to that. 666, if you were Hebrew, you would have gotten that because if you play around with the Hebrew numbers, they can also be letters,
right?
And they switch, and so what happens there is that you can spell out Nero, Caesar, beast, and it would be 666. And then think about it. It's a Roman Empire. So what is everyone buying and selling with? Well, coins that are stamped with the face of Caesar on them. John wasn't very subtle about that. The early church had Nero's boot on their throats. He was actively oppressing them. And so that's the ideas that he's playing with there. And of course, we like with all prophecy, it cycles, and so we're waiting for something larger. But remember the original context in the audience as
Right.
well.
But so there is going to be something that's going to be larger. But the point is, this mark is not in existence now. The tech can be here now, okay? In fact, the tech might be in place, but the mark's not in place. The mark is not going to happen to anybody by accident. It's a choice to get it. If you want to buy, sell, or trade in this empire, you're going to need this mark. But this mark and getting the mark is going to be in direct opposition to God.
There we go.
Okay.
We made it that far.
Now let's look at chapter 14. Now we have the ones with the different mark.
And we're going to breeze kind of through this. Take time to read it. It's very fascinating. What you see here are two camps. At this point, there's those sealed by the beast and those sealed by the lamb. They're two different parties. You see and where is this image taking place? Try to figure it out yourself. It's really weird. However, what you do see here is a final judgment of these two parties. Talk about time being a little bit weird here. You're going all the way to the end here. We're looking at a final judgment, and each of those parties, those sealed by the lamb and those sealed by the beast, have their final judgments. That's all we can get into here. Read it yourself. It's very interesting.
And so now we move into chapter 15. And chapter 15, we see the seventh trumpet blow, and now we have the bowls of wrath come out. They're the bowl judgments. The question is, how far back is this going at this point in time? Because we're circling back. So we went forward. Now we're going back again. And some say that's 3.5 years, but you really can't put a timestamp on this at this point in time.
And look at these bowls. Once again, they're very similar to the plagues in Egypt. Meditate on that a little bit. That's chapter 15. We want to talk about, or getting into the image, that's chapter 17, 15, 16. We're going into 17. We want to look at the woman, Babylon, and the dragon before we close out here.
Yeah, that's right. Now, hold on. One thing I want to mention. Don't miss the song in the midst of chapter 16.
Yeah.
So in the midst of the bowls being poured out, you have this beautiful song come up. So now with chapter 17. Again, another chapter, a lot of speculation goes on with this chapter. Who's the woman? Now, there are some, of course, it would be Protestants. They would say it's the Roman Catholic Church, and I'm sure they say something else about that. Others would like to say it's out of control capitalism, and then there's other theories as well.
And I mean, look at the picture. The mystery is told to us. Babylon the Great. Babylon is a ancient image, and it's very important to understand it in its context in Revelation. Babylon is an image that the biblical authors have been playing with all the way back in Genesis.
That's
with
right.
The Tower of Babylon. Tower of Babel, Tower of Babylon. It's the same word. So what you're getting here is this. It's the empires of every day and age, and that's what Babylon is. It's empires that were not Babylon have been called Babylon by the Bible, including Jerusalem at one point. It is the empire that is set against God. A very reoccurring image. It's every empire before and every empire to come. And here it's presented as a woman riding a dragon. Once again, the empire is backed by the dragon.
That's right. Ultimately, what we're going to see is this leads up to the end where everything is set up against Christ and Jesus returns and is victorious and the child reigns. Absolutely. Jesus reigns and he returns and brings his kingdom with him, and it's absolutely gorgeous. We're going to cover that stuff next week. So thanks everyone for listening. It's been a blast going through this with you. See you for now.